Good morning, folks. Welcome back to We Are the Game. My name is Luke. That's Michael. Other direction. I'll never get this counterintuitive pointing thing down. Today we're going to get into some interesting football takes in a segment we call Grade McCrazy. Basic idea is I'm going to hand Michael a tier list. We're using our trusty tier list tool for this, and he's going to get 5 different ideas all at once, and he's going to have to grade them individually. He can only use each grade once, so we're using kind of classical grades, A, B, C, D, F. A, B, C, D, F. I almost always say E in there somewhere. And since he can only use them one, that means he has to say 1 is absolutely nuts, bonkers. That would be A in our case. And then 1 is, yeah, of course that's going to happen. And that would be our F. So without any further ado, we're going to get right into this. Michael, here you go. So first is, we've kind of hinted at something like this before, but I decided it wasn't crazy enough, and I'm just trying to set you up for A for Arizona. So AZ wins 2 playoff games this year. We've kind of touched on the idea that they might win 1 this year, and finally Kyler could get a win, but I said, no, that's not good enough. We're going to go for 2 wins. Yeah. Then we've got a non-big 3 receiving yards leader. This was kind of wordy, so I had to break it down into smaller segments. Now, what I mean is not Jamar Chase, not Justin Jefferson, and not CeeDee Lamb. Some other wide receiver will be the receiving yards leader for 2025. Next, we've got Indianapolis Colts. So we've got Dan Jones is going to start. Essentially what I'm saying here is Dan Jones is going to start more games than Anthony Richardson. So 9+ games. Now, obviously, there's a weird version of this where Anthony Richardson starts 3 and then gets hurt, and then Dan Jones comes in and starts 4 and then gets hurt, and someone else finishes the season. It's not really what I'm talking about, but I guess it would fall into the parameters here. So, and really, this idea is supposed to be regardless of health. So they're actually just like Dan Jones and what he brings better than AR for this year. So moving on, the Saints' loss of Derek Carr, seemingly in perpetuity, leads them to have a rather unimpressive looking quarterback room. Some people are trying to pump up. I think it's Tyler Shuck, the guy they just drafted. He's played a lot of football, but I don't get the same sense of played a lot of football from him that I had from like Bo Nix, who also played for 5 years. Because when I watched Bo Nix, I was like, man, that guy's ready. He looks good. Shuck just isn't quite doing that for me. And then I've seen enough of Spencer Rattler myself and Jake Haener where I'm just like, well, that's not the answer. They're in kind of an easier division, but I still like, here we go. The Saints are going to go 0-17 and be, I think, the first team to do so. And then last but not least, just for you, and I even made the color of the block blue just for you, Dak Prescott is going to be an MVP finalist. Now, I'm not going full-blown going to win the MVP, just MVP finalist, which for those of you who are not clear on this, which may include myself, what that refers to is he's in the top 3 in voting. You know, in week 16, 17, 18, people are still like, it could be Dak Prescott. And so it doesn't have to be, you know, neck and neck with Lamar Jackson or whoever, but that he'll be mentioned at the end of the season as a good, like a decent possibility. So now that I've laid them all out for you, you've had a second to think. Tell me what you think.
Man, it's funny because on these, there's almost ways where I can talk myself into most of these, right? This is a much more challenging one than last week's, I think, in that regard. Man, all right, just to clear things up on Dak Prescott, does Stephen A get a vote in that? Because if so, that may change. All right, well then maybe that's a little less likely. All right, well let's see here. What's the least likely? The thing with the Saints, I definitely agree with you. And Tyler didn't do any himself favors. I think that there was that video that came out showing one of his throws from the combine that was not particularly impressive. You know, all those things may change, and everybody has an off moment. But man, even with that, is a question of who is Kamara at this point? Like, what's really left? He had moments last year where he looked great, especially in the early part of the season. But it's like a young quarterback would need some help, I think. So I do expect them to not be a very successful team, but it is hard to go 0-17. Like, it's almost an achievement to do it. So I wanted to say, well, that one's pretty clearly the most likely, but now I'm not so sure. I think that Dan Jones starting 9 games may end up being pretty high up there. I think if Richardson doesn't show up and get to work, they're going to have some real questions in that department. So I'm going to say the most likely. So the F, we're going to say is a non-big three receiver, yard leader. I think that's the most likely. I think that's a scenario where somebody gets injured, somebody, one thing doesn't work right on the offense, can shift a guy from being top to middle of the pack. I think of CD Lamb last year. He had a great year, and all that, but didn't finish out the season. That's all it takes. Let's see. Next up after that, I think Arizona getting to the playoffs is not a difficult. I can see that path fairly clearly. I think there's been a lot of shift in that division. So I was thinking getting to the playoffs. I'm just thinking, who do they run into as soon as they get there, and can they? How much improvement have they really made? I'm still going to say that's more likely than. I think I'll take Dan Jones starting 9 games as a D. I think there's a real shot there. I'm going to take Arizona winning 2 playoff games as my C. I think this is fairly possible. They just need to stay healthy and hope out some of their play, like Marvin Harrison Jr. takes a step forward, all of that sort of stuff. But I'm going to throw it out there as I can see that. I think that Dak Prescott is probably the B. I think there's a possibility that we go to the playoffs. We would need to actually win in the playoffs, which seems unlikely, but we would need to win in the playoffs for that to happen, I think. So that's the iffy part. But I think there's a real chance there, which leaves the Saints going 0-17. And my only reasoning on that being the least likely is how unbelievably difficult it is to not accidentally win one. Yep. So I think that's where I'm at. Any of those seem like, whoa, what were you thinking on this one? Or do those make sense? Or were you looking at one in particular a completely different way?
No, I there's different ways to look at what's a crazy idea here. And some of it's just, wow, I hadn't even looked at it that way. Some of it just seems like 100%. That's just crazy to think that might happen. And some is just crazy because it's just hasn't happened before. Like the 0-17 Saints. That's never happened. Like there's not just the Saints, but no team's gone 0-17.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It's just really hard to it's almost as hard to go 0-17, I imagine, as it is to go 17-0. Like it's obviously a different scale of likely, unlikely, but it's just you have to be. I mean, what is that? Pat McAfee's talked about. It's like every team out there with that's 0-11 is just like, guys, I don't care about the playoffs. We've got to win one game. We have to. I will not be a part of the team that went 0 for whatever 16, 17 now. And so, it is, and no coach wants to be a part of that. Even if you're like, man, I'm probably going to lose my job. I still don't want to go 0-17. GMs may tank, but coaches, players, they don't tank. It's not in their best interest. So it's incredibly unlikely. And then there's always the possibility at the end of the season is week 18 and whoever they're playing against, I guess that'd be Tampa, Carolina, or Atlanta, is already locked in. There's like, we've already made the playoff spot. So we're starting backups. And so they just won't even care. So I agree that that's probably the craziest as far as percentages. And really, some of the others might be, I had to put the D here and the F there or something like that, or something, but it's close. I see the, that's about it. I'd probably switch maybe like the Cardinals into Dan Jones one, but that's about it. Like it's really close. So it was some neat ideas. I had tried to push you a little bit because we had talked about the Cardinals winning 1 game, and I was like 2 games. I'm gonna get that A, but it wasn't quite enough. I should have said Super Bowl, and
not on that.
That would have gotten the A. If I had gone 20-0, that would have done it for sure. So, it's some fun. It's some fun stuff for sure. With Dan Jones, I was talking about. I've got a Colts friend at work, and we kind of talked about this idea, and it was, what's the difference between them? They're both somewhat athletic, but Anthony Richardson is far and away more athletic. Dan Jones can run better than people think. Dan Jones' intermediate passing is better than AR's, but Anthony Richardson can throw from where I live to where you live.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, for reference, that's not particularly close. And Dan Jones has more of a median long distance arm. So yeah, it's close, but it's just going to be like, what kind of offense do they really want to run there? So we'll see. I could see either one happening. I'm kind of rooting for Anthony Richardson because it's just been, he's fun to watch, man. But but Dan's got some experience, and it's not all bad. As much as I've had my issues with him, it's not all bad. So yeah, that's about it. As for Dak, you know, we've talked about this ad nauseum. His main two competitors are the guys who've been winning it. Lamar and Josh Allen are probably the main guys. I'd love for it to be Kyler Murray, but I mean, until he proves that, I'm going to leave him out of it. But you know, Dak can really pump out some numbers. So we will see. So unless you have anything else to add, I'm going to wrap this up.
Nope, I'm good to go. I like this list. This is a good job.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, next week will be another fun one, I hope. Until then, we really appreciate anyone who's willing to do a like and subscribe down below. It helps the channel out. Our goal by the start of the season is to maybe get to 100 subscribers. So if we can get there, we'd really appreciate it. But y'all have a great day, and we will see you next time. I think we're putting this out Saturday, and then Tuesday we'll see our next episode of Never Tell Me the Odds, where we go over some fun things there. So until then, everybody have a great day.